welcome to Based on a True Story, the podcast that compares your favorite Hollywood movies with history. Today, we'll be learning about the 2013 movie directed by Paul Greengrass and starring Tom Hanks that's simply called Captain Phillips. I'm sure you've seen it, but the movie did come out a while ago, so let's refresh our memory with a quick synopsis. The movie is named after Captain Richard Phillips, who was the commander of a container ship called the Maersk Alabama. It was on a typical route along the coast of Africa in 2009. The catch, though, was that route also included traveling through pirate-infested waters near the country of Somalia. Despite receiving warnings of heightened pirate activity, Captain Phillips decides to take a shortcut closer to the Somali coast to save time and fuel. This decision proves fateful. Two skiffs carrying Somali pirates attack the Maersk Alabama, and the crew executes security protocols by attempting to repel the attackers using fire hoses and evasive maneuvers. And at first, it works. But then, the pirates return in a stronger boat, and they manage to successfully board the vessel. Phillips remains on the bridge and is captured while the crew retreats to the engine room. Eventually, the pirates evacuate to a small lifeboat and take Captain Phillips hostage along with $30,000 in ransom money. The U.S. Navy intercedes with multiple warships, including USS Bainbridge and Navy SEAL teams. After intense negotiations and tactical positioning, Navy SEALs execute a precise rescue operation, convincing one of the pirates to board their ship, and then eliminating the three remaining pirates and freeing Captain Phillips. The movie ends with Phillips being rescued and receiving medical treatment aboard the Navy destroyer. How much of that really happened? Today, we'll be joined by none other than Brian Beckcom, the trial lawyer who represented the crew of the Maersk Alabama in the wake of the events that we see in the movie. So through his work on the trial, he knows the ins and outs of exactly what happened, and he's here today to help us separate fact from fiction in the movie. Brian is also a podcaster whose wonderful podcast shares insights from a wide range of inspiring leaders. So just do a search for Brian's podcast called Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckcom, or hop in the show notes for a direct link. Before we get started with Brian's breakdown of Captain Phillips, though, let's set up our game for today's episode. Now, if you're new to the show, since Based on a True Story is all about separating fact from fiction in the movies, you'll get to practice your skills at separating fact from fiction in this podcast episode with a game of two truths and a lie. So I'm about to give you three things that we're going to talk about in this episode. Two of those are true, and that means one of them is just an all-out lie. Are you ready? Okay, here they are. Number one, Maersk Alabama sailed within the range of known Somali pirates. Number two, the $30,000 on Maersk Alabama was intended as ransom money. Number three, Captain Phillips tried to escape from the pirates at the first chance he got. Got him? Okay, now as you're listening to our story today, see if you can figure out which one of those is a lie. And if you're watching the video version of this, you'll see I'm holding up an envelope. This has the answer inside. We're going to open this up at the end to see if you got the answer right. Okay, now it's time to connect with Brian Beckcom about the true story behind Captain Phillips. Even though no one expects movies to be entirely accurate, each movie takes different creative liberties to tell the story. So before we dig into some of the details, if you were to take a step back and give Captain Phillips an overall letter grade for its historical accuracy, what would it get?
C minus.
C minus.
You know, it's funny, Dan, people, when the movie premiered, people were asking me, like, what did you think of the movie? What did you think of the movie? I mean, I was there opening night. I mean, it was packed. And I said, just like Forrest Gump, it's a fantastic movie starring Tom Hanks, but none of it's true. It is. It actually, so in reality, here's what's true about the movie. There was an American ship called the Maersk Alabama. It was attacked by Somali pirates. The captain's name was Captain Phillips. And everything after that is basically made up.
Okay, well, we're going to dig into some of the details, as according to the movie at least. And at the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to Tom Hanks' version of Captain Richard Phillips as he takes command of a container ship named Maersk Alabama. And in the movie, his job is to sail it from Oman to Mombasa, Kenya. For some geographical context, that path takes it around the east coast of Africa, past Yemen and Somalia, before reaching Kenya. And even though Captain Phillips receives warning of pirate activity in the waters off Somalia, he decides to save time by going like 250 or 300 miles instead of the recommended 600 miles. This is all according to the movie. How well does the movie do setting up the situation with Captain Phillips and the Maersk Alabama?
Fairly good, fairly good job of that. And what I wish the movie did a little better job of at the beginning in terms of the setup is putting in context how dangerous these waters were at the time. I mean, we're talking about, I don't know the exact number, but I want to say like tens and tens, if not hundreds of pirate attacks on both commercial and non-commercial vessels. In fact, I think there was a naval vessel from Yemen or something that was attacked by pirates. And, the other thing is I don't know if the movie does a good job of this or not, but this is at the time we're dealing with Somalia off the east coast of Africa. Somalia, for all intents and purposes, is a failed country. They have no economy, they have no really functioning government, and they have a bunch of people there that have to eat. And so the people that were going out and taking these people off of these ships, either taking them for ransom, taking them back to Somalia, or a lot of these ships carried cash specifically to pay off, quote, pirates. What we got to keep in mind is these are not like highly trained military style pirates. These are fishermen. I mean, these are Somali fishermen that some of whom are teenagers who realized that if these commercial ships got within a certain range of the Somalian coast, they had no self-defense and they were easy pickings. And so if you were in that situation, I mean, I don't blame these Somalians in many respects. Like if you were in a failed country and you had to feed your family and you had the choice of going out and catching fish all day long and selling them for nothing, or you could go out and make a quick score off an unprotected American vessel where they basically carry money specifically to pay you. I mean, what would you do? So, and that was what, in my opinion, kind of made it worse is not only did they know that at the time, these were literally the most dangerous waters in the world. I mean, maybe one or two other areas you could compare to, but certainly top two or three. And everybody knew nobody had any weapons. Like nobody had any self-defense and everybody knew it. So it's kind of like, you walk into a really crappy part of town and you hold up your $20,000 Rolex and you start waving at everybody. I mean, what do you expect's going to happen? Right?
I mean, knowing that the movie focuses more on the ship itself, it doesn't really talk much about what's going on in Somalia at the time. But I like that context that you gave because it makes a lot more sense why it was happening. But also, like even in the beginning of the movie, before the pirates go out, it almost looks. I mean, there's a bunch of them around, almost like they're looking for a job for that day, and they're wanting to feed their families.
Absolutely. Like it's like in America, sometimes you go to Home Depot and there's a bunch of people outside waiting to get hired. Like, do you blame them? Do you blame people? Wherever you fall politically on the immigration issue, if you lived in Mexico and your family was getting threatened by drug cartels, if you were in that violent circumstance, what would you do? Like, so in a way, it's really hard to blame these poor fishermen from Somalia for doing what they did, especially when we were just basically kind of, attempting them, just tempting them to do it, just saying, here's a bunch of money, here's a ship carries $30,000 in petty cash for every one of these trips that they'll just give to you. What do you expect? And by the way, after this case, one of the things that I'm most proud about this case is there hasn't been a single successful pirate attack on an American commercial vessel since my case. And there's a good reason for that. All of the ships are armed now. I don't know if you're curious to know why they weren't armed before and they're armed now, but there's actually a pretty simple explanation for this.
Yeah, I am curious because that was going to be one of my questions too. Because they don't have any weapons on the ship.
None, zero, no weapons at all. And now they do, by the way. But so when I filed this case, one of the things I said was if you were going to require these sailors to go into these pirate-infested waters, you should let them defend themselves with weapons. All these ships, for the most part, are insured by London-based insurance companies or insurance syndicates or similar type of insurance syndicates. And the insurance syndicates went crazy when I filed this case and said, you need to arm these guys, because what they're worried about, guess what? Big surprise. They ain't worried about the sailors. They're worried about what's on the ships, making the money, right? And what they were saying, look, if we provide seamen with pistols or other sorts of weapons to protect themselves, they might kill each other or they might blow up our cargo. That was their excuse. Okay. I know it's hard to believe. And I was like, I just don't think that's true. And have you seen a single report of a U.S. ship blowing up because they had pistols on the ship? Or have you seen any of those reports? Of course you haven't. And because it was a really bad idea. So anyway, it was interesting to see, because at the time, again, remember the context. I mean, we're talking about pirate attack after pirate attack. I mean, we're talking about almost on a weekly basis. And so it was super dangerous. And we also knew, by the way, these nautical miles, staying a certain number of nautical miles off the coast of Somali, that was extremely specific. There's a very specific reason for that. And that is, by and large, these fishermen are on fishing boats and they cannot go out past a certain distance. And so it would be impossible for any of these ships to have gotten attacked past a certain distance by these fishing vessels because they can't get out that far. What Phillips decided to do, literally in the face of countless international security warnings, was he basically decided to take a shortcut and go twice as close as he was told to go to save fuel. That was basically what happened.
So it was to save time and money, basically, was the reason for it, despite the obvious risks.
That's exactly what it was. That's absolutely exactly what it was. And, people often ask me, how do you get this case, Beckcom? Like, how does a lawyer even get this case? And there's a real specific reason for that, too. So this is long before anybody, this was international news when it happened. But at the beginning, nobody had any idea there was going to be a movie starring Tom Hanks. So Phillips basically causes the problem. He's the captain. He's in charge. He makes the decisions that lead to his crew getting captured. And then what happens afterwards? They all come back to America. The crew gets together with Phillips and says, we want to write a book and maybe do a story about our experience. And Captain Phillips tells him, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm going to write my own book.
Mm.
And they were like, well, hold on a second. You were the one that caught it. It was your fault that we did this. So they were like, if he's going to write a book trying to whitewash all the screw ups that he made, we need to make sure people really know about it. And so that's what generated, initially at least, the desire of the crew to make sure the true story got out. And I could give you example after example, but there were 4 pirates. 3 of them got killed by Navy SEALs. 1 of them was captured. That pirate is now in Fort Wayne, Indiana federal prison as the only prisoner in the United States that's been convicted of piracy in the last 100 years. There's a question about whether, when he was convicted, whether he was even an adult. Because, not surprisingly, the birth records in Somalia are horrible. So it was really hard to figure out his age. But some of your listeners may remember the perp walk when the prisoner was walking down the stairs of federal courthouse. He had a big eye patch on, like a medical eye patch. And that was because my unarmed crew took utensils out of the kitchen, and one of my clients stabbed that pirate in the eye with a spoon. And so it really, truly was the crew that was heroic, and the captain that was the numbskull that kind of led these guys into this situation to begin with.
I can understand, I guess, from his perspective, from the captain's perspective, then why he would want to write the book that told his version of the, to kind of make himself seem better.
Yeah. That's human nature. I think we've seen that so many, throughout history, we see that again and again. Winston Churchill, one of my heroes, has a great saying. They said one time, they said, "What do you think history's going to say about you, Mr. Churchill?" He said, "History's going to treat me well because I'm going to write it."
It'll say whatever I want it to say.
Right. History, history is a story of the victor's perspective.
Yeah.
Pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, one thing we see in the movie after Captain Phillips gets the warnings of pirate activity, he runs the crew through some security drills that include exercises for what to do if they encounter pirates. The drills like attaching fire hoses to shoot high pressure water at the attackers, making sure cages and doors to sensitive areas are locked, things like that. But then while they're running through the drills, Tom Hanks' version of Captain Phillips notices something approaching on the radar, and they're actually two small boats approaching. Not to get too far ahead of the movie's timeline, but we all know what happens in the movie. So obviously those security drills didn't seem to work. Can you unravel the security drills on Maersk Alabama? What were they supposed to be? And did the movie accurately show it to us?
Yeah. So every single ship that sails internationally like that is supposed to have something called a VSP. Victor, I forget what S is. VSP stands for Vessel Security Protocol. And in fact, they have to file that with certain international agencies. And those are top secret. And I'm not going to get into the details of any of those because when I have cases with vessel security plans, I usually have an agreement with the vessel owner that we're going to keep this confidential because it's important for the safety of the sailors. We wouldn't want that information getting out in public. But every single, I can talk about it in general terms, every single vessel then and now has a VSP and they have to execute and practice that VSP on a regular basis. The problem was at the time, the security protocols were basically worthless. I mean, like those water cannons you saw in the movie, they didn't exist. There was, and there are a lot of different, I mean, again, think about what we're talking about. These are fishermen, okay? They're not highly trained pirates. I did a pirate case off the coast of West Africa where an American Marine who was retired, but he was captaining a boat, got kidnapped by mercenaries from Boko Haram. Those guys are dangerous. Those guys are bad news. Like you could be armed and the Boko Haram guys could still get you. One weapon, one pistol against these fishermen is enough to make them go to the next vessel because they're looking for targets of opportunity. They're looking for the softest targets, but they certainly in every vessel, including this one, had security practices, security protocols. They have security drills. The problem is when you're drilling something that doesn't stop anybody, you're just wasting your time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it goes back to would really help if they were armed.
Yeah. Well, they are now. Like I said, they are now. And it's really made a dramatic difference. I mean, have you seen any story? You remember back then, there were Italian ships, ships from all these different countries, German cruise ships, all these ships getting attacked and boarded. And that just doesn't happen anymore, at least off the coast of East Africa.
Well, if we go back to the movie's version of events, the security drills turn into real world when the crew on Maersk Alabama see those boats approaching. And they know there's no way that a huge container ship can outrun the two smaller pirate skiffs. So Captain Phillips tries a few tactics to try to discourage the pirates. First, he tries the U.S. Maritime emergency line, but there's no answer there. He reaches out to the U.K. Maritime Trade Operation to let them know what's going on. They think it's probably just some fishermen, so they're not really much help. So then Captain Phillips pretends like he's talking to the U.S. Navy on the radio, requesting air support, knowing that the pirates are close enough to be listening to their radio traffic. And that seems to work according to the movie. The movie shows one of the two boats turning around because of the radio communications. But then the other boat keeps coming. And so Captain Phillips orders the limit on the engine removed and the huge ship just starts kind of zigzagging so that they can make big waves for the tiny pirate boat to try to overcome. And then after a while, that seems to work too, because the single engine on the tiny pirate skiff just loses power and dies. How much of that actually happened?
Not much. Not much. I mean, it is that movie is highly dramatized. And, to be clear, I'm not complaining about that. Like, that's what Hollywood does. I mean, they tell stories, and sometimes, actually all the time, they dramatize those stories. So most of that stuff is either never happened in real life, or it happened, but it's highly, highly dramatized. Like, I don't know if you remember the scene in the movie where Captain Phillips basically gives himself up to the kidnappers. That didn't happen. I mean, like he basically went kicking and screaming. Like, in the movie, they make it sound like he's heroic, and he's like, "I'm giving myself up for the crew." It was actually the opposite. The crew was the one that was fighting back. He was hiding, trying to figure out a way to get out of this and save his skin. And the pirates just took him. And I'll tell you something else that's really strange about this. And if any of your listeners know the answer to this, please call me, because I still haven't figured this out. The $30,000 in bounty money that was on that ship has never been found.
Did they, I mean, in the movie, I think they give it to the pirates. Did they not do that, or do we not know what happened to it? It just kind of disappeared?
We don't know. There were theories that the Navy SEALs took it. There were theories that the pirates got it. There were theories maybe Captain Phillips knows what happens to it, but I don't know. That's the point. Like, nobody ever figured that out. Quite frankly, if the Navy SEALs took it, I'm like, I don't care. I hope those guys spend it on fun stuff, because I mean, what they did was remarkable. The scene where they show, like, as I recall in the movie, it's like boom, 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 and the pirates are dead kind of thing. It was more like, I mean, it was more like there was a lot more. It wasn't quite as precise as it's depicted in the movie. But again, you're not going to the movie to learn history. You're going to the movie to be entertained. So I'm not faulting Hollywood or Tom Hanks or anybody for dramatizing a dramatic movie. But when you're in the courthouse, in fact, I'll tell you a good story about this, Dan. Once I found out there was a movie, then Tom Hanks was going to play Captain Phillips, I immediately went to the court. I went to the judge. I said, "Hey, judge, this is a real problem. Everybody loves Tom Hanks. Like, and it's going to prejudice my clients, because truly the person that made the most mistakes in this case was Phillips. Everybody's going to associate him with Tom Hanks, and it's going to really hurt my clients. So would it be okay, Judge, if we went to trial before the movie came out?" So Maersk's lawyers come up, "Oh, no. We can make sure that we get fair jurors, and that they won't let any of that stuff influence their decision, and we need a lot of time." So anyway, the point is that the judge listened to the defense lawyers and not me, and he didn't let me go to trial early. And then the movie comes out, and all of a sudden I got $5 to $10 million of free marketing publicity, and I still get it. I mean, even today, I'm on a podcast 15 plus years later talking about this case. I get something like 16,000 website views a month, 15 years after the fact. And I tell people, I'm like, sometimes it's good not to get what you want. Because the fact that I lost that request ended up being way better for my clients and my firm.
Yeah, everybody loves Tom Hanks, though, so I understand that. I mean, I don't know how you not have some little bit of bias. I guess if you never even saw it, but I mean, it's a Tom Hanks movie. Who's not going to want to see that?
Who doesn't like Tom Hanks?
Yeah.
And I, by the way, I took Captain Phillips' deposition for 2 days, and up in the Northeast, it's confidential, it's sealed and stuff like that. But let me just put it to you this way: he ain't Tom Hanks.
Well, to be fair, none of us are. There's only one Tom Hanks.
That's true. That's true. But again, I don't think any of us are comparing ourselves to Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks ain't playing me in a movie. He ain't playing you in a movie.
Fair point.
Yeah.
Well, if we go back to the movie, speaking of, despite failing the first time around, the next day, the pirates try again, and the leader, Abdwali Musa, returns with a more powerful boat. This time, the crew on Maersk Alabama, they try basically the same thing. They try increasing the engine power, doing the hard turns. It seemed to work last time, but this time it doesn't, because the pirates have a slightly bigger boat. The movie focuses on, it has 2 engines instead of 1. And then the only other manner of defense are the fire hoses that we talked about earlier, that the crew on Alabama run around the whole ship, making it hard for the pirates to get close. You have the water shooting out. But then one of the hoses slips. So we see, I think his name was Shane Murphy, going to fix it, one of the crew. And the pirates start shooting at him. So then Phillips orders him to get to safety. And that's how the pirates manage to attach a ladder to the side of the ship, climb up, and then take over the boat. And from Captain Phillips' perspective, according to the movie, he knows that his men don't have the firepower to defend against the pirates. Again, no guns on the ship. So he orders Shane to go down to the engine room with most of the crew to hide, where they can lock themselves in and then cut the power to the ship so the pirates can't move it. And then Captain Phillips and 2 other crew members stay on the bridge, where they're captured by the 4 Somali pirates. Was that ultimately how the pirates were able to take control of Maersk Alabama?
No, and no.
I had a feeling it would be something like that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not really what happened. Although I will say this, one of the ways that the pirates had figured out how to get some more distance from the coast is to use kind of a bigger mothership.
Mm. Yeah, we see that in the movie. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They would have these larger fishing vessels that could actually get out farther. And then they would deploy smaller vessels once they got out to where they wanted to go. So that part of it's true. And again, it's like, I don't know how to put this, but it's like there's enough truth in the movie for it not to be like a completely fictional story, but everything is so, I keep saying the word dramatized, exaggerated, as to basically be not true, if that makes sense. Like the idea that they were, they're doing some, I mean, it reminds me of Star Wars when like Luke Skywalker's being chased in an X-Wing fighter and he's doing all these crazy dodges and he's, the idea that they were around, they had this giant or this giant commercial vessel in the middle of the ocean doing these crazy evasive maneuvers while they're shooting water cannons out the back, and Captain Phillips is standing there like George Washington crossing the, what was the river he crossed, the Brandywine or whatever, on the front of the boat is, I mean, it's Hollywood. That's what it is. And enough of that happened to where you can say, well, they didn't totally make it up, but the timing, the sequence, the substance, the procedure is by and large so overly exaggerated and overly dramatized as as to say that's not the way it happened. I mean, you could probably confidently say that.
Did they end up splitting like the movie shows, where there were some in the bridge and then some of the crew in the engine room, kind of separated like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting piece of the case. So the crew actually evacuated as they were supposed to essentially a safe room, and bolted themselves in. That was one of the and this didn't apply just to Maersk Alabama, but generally speaking, in the maritime world, there are rooms that you can seal, and like if you're getting attacked, you can use them as safe rooms. In fact, that's what happened in my Marine West Coast of Africa case. He went into a room with his crew, bolted themselves in. The problem is that those pirates had saws that could like literally cut through the steel. And then once they made a little hole, they stuck their machine guns through the hole. And so we're going to start firing this thing into this room, and bullets are going to, I mean, everybody's going to be dead within 10 seconds, right? Well, so my crew ended up evacuating, and they stayed in that room. The pirates locked them in this room for like 18 hours. I think it was 120 degrees the whole time. They had no water and food. So it was a pretty bad situation.
Wow. Yeah, that's...
They do have safe rooms is the point, though. Like on these boats, one of the things they'll often do is say, everybody, because think about it, on these boats, you've seen these, like they have doors that they can and seal shut. Like if you're in super bad weather and you need to make the ship, at least parts of the ship, watertight, you can go into these rooms that you can really, really seal tight. So that is a pretty common defense mechanism. And then what you do is, the idea is you get in there and you buy enough time to where the posse can come get you. right? Like you don't have to stay in there for a week. You just get in there, you send out a distress signal, you get in that room, you seal yourself in, and you hope that the posse will be there within 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, something like that.
Well, if we go back to the movie, the pirates start searching the ship to try to find the rest of the crew. And Captain Phillips is trying to get the pirates to look in the cargo deck. But the pirates' leader, Musa, knows that there's a problem with the ship's power, so he wants to go to the engine room. Meanwhile, the crew's hiding away in the engine room, and they devise a plan to fight back against the pirates. As Phillips is leading the pirates around the ship, he's kind of giving little hints here and there. He'd say things like, well, we'd better hope the emergency power stays on, because if it won't, then we're not going to be able to see anything if it goes off. And things like, be careful in here with bare feet, because you can cut them on almost anything. And then over the radio, the crew kind of picks up on some of these. They break some glass to lay a trap for the barefooted pirates. And that works when one of the pirates, a guy named Bilal, I believe, gets badly cut. Did the Maersk Alabama crew try to fight back against the pirates like the movie shows?
Absolutely, they did. In fact, what I was mentioning earlier is they grabbed utensils and were using those as weapons. And in fact, the one pirate that survived got stabbed in the eye with a spoon, and that's why he had an eye patch on. That was one of my clients that did that. I would actually, the way I would say, if you want to be as close to the truth as possible, once the pirates got on the ship, the crew pretty much did exactly what they were trained to do. Captain Phillips, on the other hand, did not get to where he was supposed to get to. And what ended up happening? It ended up causing the entire security protocol to get thrown off kilter, because now all of a sudden the pirates have access to Phillips and all his knowledge plus the money, and they can use that to leverage what they want to leverage against the crew. Had the captain come in there like he was supposed to and executed the security plan, you don't have all these other outstanding issues that the pirates can basically use the captain as a negotiating piece. Like, you don't want to do that. Like it's funny because in this case, not funny, funny, ironic. It's funny because in this case, the person that screwed up was the captain, like Phillips. There is no question at all that the reason that these men got kidnapped and taken hostage and put in a room that was 120 plus degrees for more than 18 hours with no food and water. The reason is Captain Phillips. And then also the company for letting him deviate so wildly from the recommendations. But in my West Coast pirate case, I represented the captain. Like, the captain did everything he was supposed to do. Like, just boom, 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 boom. Made the distress call. Boko Haram pirates coming. Highly trained, highly armed. Gets all his crew into the safe room, locks it up, does everything precisely right. And so, and by the way, like I said, they drilled a hole through the steel door and put the gun in there. And so he had to say, look, I'm coming out. Leave my crew alone. I'll come out. And so he actually came out, gave himself up to the pirates, and was taken to the jungles of West Africa for 18 days. And then ultimately released after some really bad stuff happened to him. But my point is, he did everything right. He still got taken, but he did everything he was supposed to do. Captain Phillips basically didn't do anything he was supposed to do.
If he had followed protocol, if Phillips had followed protocol, instead of staying up on the bridge, he should have gone down in the room basically with the rest of the crew. So the entire crew was in there after sending out the signal. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. I mean, and there was multiple different areas on the ship where you could use as a secure location. He should have been in one of those.
Okay. Oh, and so not necessarily with the crew, depending on what he could get to, but
yeah, depending on where he was at the time. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in the movie, Musa gets captured by the crew down below. And in particular, the movie focuses on, I think it's the chief engineer, Mike Perry, who subdues him with a pocket knife. So the movie kind of sets up this tension of the pirates holding crew hostage on the bridge, including Captain Phillips. And then they have their own injured leader held hostage down below. And that's when we see Tom Hanks' version of Captain Phillips offer the pirates $30,000 in the ship's safe in exchange for them leaving on one of the Maersk Alabama lifeboats. And ultimately, that's what they agree on. So the plan is for the crew to get Captain Phillips back while the pirates get their leader back, Musa. so then they can leave with the money. And we'll talk about what happens with that deal in a moment. But was the movie correct to show that there was this deal between the pirates and the crew?
No. And again, like I said, nobody knows what happened to that money. Nobody knows. I mean, I'd love for somebody to call me up and say, "Hey, I figured out what happened." In fact, there was something really strange that happened a few years afterwards. 2 Navy SEALs were on, as I recall, it was the same vessel, and died of a drug overdose. And there was all sorts of questions about, first of all, why were there 2 Navy SEALs on that vessel? Why was there heroin on that? There was some really weird stuff going on. Where was the ransom money? Mike Perry, that's the name I haven't heard in quite some time. So he was one of the few crew members that decided not to join the case. So he was aligned with Captain Phillips. He is, as I recall, was he the first mate?
I think they mentioned him being the
Or chief engineer.
Yeah.
So chief engineer is a high ranking position on those ships. That would put you, depending on how it's staffed, that would certainly put you in the chain of command, at least. I mean, you're probably the number one guy on most ships in the engine room. Plus you're usually an officer. So he was a real high ranking person. What I found, Dan, and I think most of your listeners, that this won't surprise them, is when company management screws up, company management circles the wagons. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I mean, when I want to know the truth about what happened, I'm not asking the CEO or the COO. Like, I want to ask the line level workers, "Hey guys, what happened here?" So Perry was one of he was very vocal in not wanting to join the case. Totally his decision, and totally fine with that, but not surprising considering he was at the level, the managerial level, where you might be able to start saying, well, what were you doing, Mike? Why didn't you stop, Captain? I mean, again, a lot of this stuff is confidential, but there's internal communications from Phillips and other people that talk about the decision to go more than twice as close as was recommended. And I'll just put it this way, that there's a reason that Maersk doesn't want those released.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about the 30,000. Was that something that they had as specifically for pirates, like you were talking about earlier on Alabama, that was specifically for pirates?
Yeah, absolutely. And that isn't actually, I don't know if that's true now. I have a strong suspicion that they carry that kind of money on ships now, but back at the time that was a widespread practice. And it's interesting because it's really, there's something called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in America, which prohibits, among other things, American companies from negotiating ransoms, or paying bribes, or things like that. So it's really close to the line when you're talking about pay. And of course, the idea is, the whole "we don't negotiate with terrorists" idea, because that'll encourage more terrorism. That's the idea. We don't want companies paying bribes because it's going to encourage more bribery. We don't want ransoms because paying ransoms because it's going to encourage more kidnappings. And so you got to be super careful as an American company about how you deal with those situations. In fact, like in my West Coast case, the captain was ransomed from the pirates, but he was not ransomed by the American company. Like, they go through intermediaries, usually located in the UK and places like that then go through intermediaries that then take care of what they need to take care of. In fact, there was a movie, I think, called Proof of Life or something like that, which kind of depicts some of these specialist kidnapping and ransom companies that will go in and take care of. But the problem is that, like Exxon, let's say they have an employee off the coast of West Africa that gets kidnapped. Exxon can't, it's illegal for them to pay ransoms. It's illegal for them to negotiate with terrorists. Like, that is explicitly illegal under United States law. So they got to be real careful about how they do it, but on the other hand, they want to take care of their employees if they can. And good for them. I hope they figure out a way to do that. I mean, if you got billions of dollars, you should spend some of that on your people.
Yeah, and I mean, in that context, in this particular case, like $30,000 for the Alabama and the crew. I mean, it's worth 30,000. Like, I mean, for their safety.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the ransom, and if we head back into the movie, the exchange of Captain Phillips and Musa doesn't go as well. It doesn't go as planned, I should say. And instead, as the pirates are leaving the ship, they don't let Phillips leave the lifeboat. He was in there kind of showing them how it works. And then the lifeboat is launched from Maersk, Alabama, with all the pirates inside and Captain Phillips as their hostage. And the movie suggests that the pirates weren't happy with the $30,000 from the safe, so they wanted to ransom Phillips for even more money. Did that happen the way the movie shows it?
Not really. And again, there was some really strange questions about. So the money, as far as everybody knows, that the cash went on to that lifeboat with Phillips and with the pirates. Now, the pirate that didn't get killed wasn't on the lifeboat; he stayed on board. But that money was on that lifeboat and has never been found. There's theories that the Navy SEALs did something with it. The precision of the operation that's depicted in the movie, it was not quite as precise as that in real life. Like, there was a lot more stuff going on. But look, I mean, again, Phillips was taken out in a lifeboat. He didn't give himself up. He was taken against his will, basically kicking and screaming for all practical purposes. And the Navy SEALs did come in there, and the Navy SEALs did a badass job getting him back. So all that stuff is true. But again, the details are so, I mean, it's kind of like, what's the movie, Saving Private Ryan? Remember the beginning scene of Saving Private Ryan? Like how intense that was? That is so highly dramatized. It's ridiculous. All that stuff, like there were men that stormed the beaches. There were men that got killed. All that stuff happened. But they have to compress like that event into something that you can digest on a movie screen in about 5 minutes, or however long that scene took, 10 minutes or whatever it was. And in the Maersk, Alabama, I think that scene takes 5 minutes. And then you've got Tom Hanks afterwards doing the Tom Hanks thing where he's breaking down and all that stuff. But I'm talking about the actual operation of rescuing him was significantly longer, and they got to compress the time and they got to make it interesting and stuff like that. So basically the details of the movie are all made up. The large picture of what happened is true, but the details are just, and I'm not criticizing Hollywood or anybody, but like that's what they have to do.
Yeah. Again, movies are for entertainment. Well, you talked about the Navy, and we're at the point in the movie's timeline where the Navy starts to come into the picture. After all of this escalation, we see the U.S. Navy getting involved. They send multiple ships to deal with the hostage situation with Captain Phillips. The primary ship in the movie is a destroyer called USS Bainbridge. In the movie, the U.S. Navy has identified the Somali mothership that we talked about briefly earlier. They say it's a Taiwanese fishing ship that was hijacked by pirates a year earlier under a Somali warlord named Garad. And then we kind of get almost a little backstory that the captain of Bainbridge recognizes Garad's name. He's somebody who apparently just wants money, so they think they can negotiate for Captain Phillips. But the clock is ticking because the pirates are trying to reach the Somali coast. There's 2 more Navy ships that are coming, USS Boxer and USS Halliburton. They're sent with the Navy SEALs. And the way the movie sets this up, basically, Bainbridge is there first. And if they can't resolve the situation before the SEALs get there, the Navy SEALs are going to take care of it. Can you share what the situation was like as the Navy entered the picture?
Yeah, the Maersk, Alabama was actually lucky in a way. I mean, I hate to say lucky given what happened, but they were lucky that there were American naval ships that were so close by. That's almost never the case. And so at that point, there really is nobody Captain Phillips at some point loses command of the vessel. Like the most famous saying, maybe of I'm the captain now. I mean, how many times? That's basically that's a meme now. And by the way, I'll tell you a cool story about that. That was completely ad-libbed, and that actor, it was not a professionally trained actor. Like, he's Somalian, but they did a casting call in Milwaukee where there's a huge Somali community, and they picked those 4 guys, and they're not actors. They had no training at all. When he comes up there and he says, "I'm the captain now," that's completely ad-libbed, and that's the most famous line in the movie, and probably the most famous line of any movie, or at least top 5 over the last 15 years, right? I'm the captain now. But in any event, so there are, and I got to be a little bit cautious about, I don't want to give up any confidentialities, but there are people in Africa who serve as conduits between commercial and governmental interest and these pirates or terrorists or whatever you want to call them. And it's like we were talking about just a few minutes ago, there's a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Got to be super duper careful about running afoul of that. But like, there are local warlords and chieftains. There are people like Russell Crowe on the movie Proof of Life who specialize in dealing with those people. There are back channels that oftentimes you can utilize to get stuff done. But on the flip side, the more you do this, the more you encourage more attacks. I mean, the more ransoms that are paid, the more kidnapping. So it's a really, really tough problem. I mean, if it was your family member that was kidnapped, I wouldn't care how much, pay them whatever they want. I want my family member back. But the policymakers have to look beyond just the one individual events. They have to look at kind of a broader. And so, boy, it's a tough call. But then once you've engaged the United States military, they're in charge. Like that at that point, you've lost control. Like, once you send them in, they're gonna do what they're gonna do, and there's not anything anybody can do to stop it, quite frankly.
They're the captain now.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Love it.
Well, the movie kind of, it focuses, then kind of shifts to talking about, with Captain Phillips and that hostage situation. But we do see a brief scene where the Navy, there's some Navy who go on the Alabama, and they're there to escort it to Mombasa. Did that happen? Did they get a Navy escort basically to make sure they made it there safely the rest of the way? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And again, it was kind of like, as I recall, and you could fact check me on this, the reason that we were able to use Navy SEALs to rescue these guys is because they were in close proximity. And the reason they were in close proximity is I think we were doing some military exercises over there, and they were able to divert some assets and take care of this pretty quickly. So people criticize Obama all the time for not going to war with Syria and a lot of other things he did. But I'll tell you what, he made some tough calls. Like, that Navy SEAL thing could have gone sideways. And Captain Phillips could have been killed. The crew could have been killed. That thing could have gone sideways in a heartbeat. He made the call, well, let's go in there and get him. But, that stuff is, the way that all that special forces stuff is depicted in movies is super clean and almost antiseptic. It is not like that in real life. Like, it's nasty. I mean, when they went in and got Bin Laden, one of the Black Hawk helicopters crashed, right? It was a mess. Like, it did not go the way they planned at all. But it was fortunate. As I recall, again, people can fact check me, the military was doing some sort of exercise, some sort of joint exercises over there. And so they were able to get over there quickly, where that's usually not the case, unfortunately.
That makes sense. And in the movie, they show the other ships start arriving with Bainbridge, but we see Captain Phillips, he tells his captors that he has to pee, and they let him go outside. And then Phillips pushes one of the pirates that's watching him, Bilal, he pushes him into the water, and then he jumps in too, trying to escape, and he starts swimming towards the Navy ships. But then the pirates turn around the lifeboat, they start shooting at him in the water, and so they bring him back, bring Captain Phillips back into the lifeboat, and they start beating him pretty severely. Pretty much at that point, you get the impression from the movie that he tried to escape, and because they beat him so badly, he's not going to try to escape again. Is it true that Captain Phillips tried to escape like we see in the movie?
No, that is complete. That is so again, that was part of the that's the kind of stuff that worried me the most because it basically inverted the real story. The real story was Captain Phillips screwed up, Maersk screwed up, and the crew made the best of it. I mean, that's really what the crew was heroic. And I could tell story after story, but I've already told you about the spoon against the AK-47s. That was not Phillips. That was the crew. And the way the part of the movie that you're talking about is the part that I think bothered my clients the most because it really was the opposite of what actually happened. Phillips, he wasn't beat up. He didn't jump in the water and try to escape. None of that happened. I mean, that is completely and totally not what happened. And it makes it look like the crew was a bunch of idiots and Captain Phillips is some sort of heroic figure. And it was the complete opposite, like I said. And so that part is definitively not true.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely does make him seem more heroic when he's trying to escape. He's doing these things and taking this. But I guess that's Tom. You have Tom Hanks in a movie. You got to let him be Tom Hanks sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. And again, they're not trying to win a lawsuit in this movie. They're trying to entertain people who have come to sit in a seat for 2 hours and be entertained. And so I don't blame Hollywood for doing any of this stuff. What I had to be careful about and what my job was and still is to protect my client's interest. And so what I was concerned about, and I'm very proud, quite frankly, of the fact we were able to do this. I'm normally not taking on $1 billion international corporation with multiple $1 billion insurance companies behind them. I do that all the time. But then what I don't do is have Hollywood and the Hollywood publicity machine on top of that, telling a narrative that hurts my case. That was the hard part of it, right? So I had to, going against these big insurance companies, these big corporations, that's a Tuesday for me. Going against Hollywood and their publicity machine was a completely new experience. Fortunately, we did a fantastic job of, like, everybody basically knows, I think, that movie was a good movie, but there's questions about the accuracy of it. And that was because we were able to go on, nowadays you can get on social media, you can go on websites, you can put up videos, you can put up all this information. Even 15 years ago, I have a degree in computer science. I'm technically pretty competent. I was able to use that to get our news out there, to get on Nightline, Dateline, London's Daily Telegraph, New York Times. When you looked up Captain Phillips, the movie, two links below, it would say www.thetruthaboutcaptainphillips.com. That would take you to my website. So that was really the most difficult part of the case. Proving what happened, that's right in my wheelhouse. I do that on a daily basis. Proving what happened without letting Hollywood and all the publicity completely hijack the narrative, that was a little bit more challenging.
Well, the movie ends with a whirlwind of events. The SEAL team arrives, they take over command and communication with the pirates, and immediately they confuse the pirates by listing off all of their names and where they're from. They go on to say that they've spoken to their tribal elders, and the elders are being flown in to negotiate an exchange with Captain Phillips for the money. And while that happens, they need someone to go aboard Bainbridge to negotiate the deal with the elders, and they're going to tow the lifeboat to the exchange spot. Musa agrees to do this. The tow line is attached and attached to the lifeboat, I should say. And then Musa goes to Bainbridge for the meeting with the elders, and that leaves the other three pirates with Captain Phillips on the boat. Meanwhile, the Navy ship turns on these really bright lights because I think it was like 0400, so early in the morning, dark out. And they tell the pirates that's just for towing them to the exchange spot. But really what they're doing is they're getting the snipers into position. We see Phillips start fighting against his captors. They subdue him, tie him up, blindfold him. And then that moment that you talked about before, you see the three Navy SEALs just perfectly timed shot, 3 shots to kill the remaining pirates at the exact same time. And then back on Bainbridge, Musa is taken into custody. There's no elders, no negotiation. And then as the only pirate left alive, he's going to face trial for piracy in America. Captain Phillips returns safely to Bainbridge, and that's where the movie ends as he's getting medical treatment. How well does the movie do showing the way the whole situation came to an end?
It does a decent job of that. I mean, the way Tom Hanks depicts Captain Phillips breaking down is all Tom Hanks. I mean, that is nothing at all like Captain. I mean, that is Tom Hanks at his best. Okay. The Navy SEALs would never allow Hollywood to show their trade secrets. So some of the stuff that they basically, it was like a bait and switch is what's depicted in the movie. We're going to the pirates are going to be looking this way and we're going to be doing stuff over here. They do that kind of stuff all the time. The actual operational details are not the same because, again, there's all sorts of different security issues involved in this. I mean, people probably don't appreciate. I went on an inspection at Los Angeles Harbor 2 weeks ago. I brought a friend of mine, and she could not believe how dangerous. We were on a huge commercial cargo ship doing an inspection with 18-wheelers, trains. It was raining. We have these cargoes, going over. She couldn't believe how dangerous it was. What people don't realize is how every time one of these huge ships comes into a port, it's like an enormous bomb. Like, those things are so tempting, these big commercial ships, for bad actors, that the security plans and the security protocols are like extra critical, and we don't want people knowing about them publicly. So a lot of the stuff that the military does or that the companies do, they won't talk about publicly, but you can talk around it on the edges. So yes, the Navy SEALs did a fantastic job. Yes, they ended up rescuing Captain Phillips, but the surgical nature that's depicted in the movie is nothing like it actually happened. In the movie, there's 3 shots, right? But they did a naval investigation afterwards, and there was at least 20 rounds fired.
Little more, little, not as surgical precision as you were talking, as we see in the movie. Yeah.
No.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on to chat about the movie Captain Phillips. Aside from being a trial lawyer who represented some of the Maersk Alabama crew after the events we see in the movie, you've got a fascinating podcast of your own called Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckcom. Now, if you're listening to this, check the show notes for a link to Brian's podcast so you can queue it up after we're done here. And while they do that, and before I let you go, Brian, can you give us an overview of your podcast and where they can learn more about you?
Yeah, Lessons from Leaders started in the middle of quarantine, features people that are positive leaders that maybe a lot of people don't know about, mainly military, sports, New York Times bestselling authors. And it's a focus on people that are doing really, really cool things that maybe don't get quite the publicity that they deserve. So it's a great show, and I think it kind of ties in a little bit with this. Like, you're getting a true story of like leadership on the ground. So, we have all these leaders on TV, or so-called leaders we see all these all the time, but my theory is the real leaders, you don't really hear much about them. And those are the kind of people I try to feature on my show.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again so much for your time, Brian.
Thank you. It's been a real joy, a lot of fun.
This episode of Based on a True Story was produced by me, Dan Lefebvre. Thank you once again to Brian Beckcom for sharing his time and expertise to help us separate fact from fiction in the movie Captain Phillips. As you've seen from Brian today, he has a ton of knowledge that he's happy to share, and beyond that, he's also a podcaster who's great at harnessing the knowledge of his guests. So go subscribe to Brian's podcast called Lessons from Leaders. I've got a link to that in the show notes, as well as on the show's home on the web at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/380. Okay, now it's time for the answer to our 2 truths and a lie game from the beginning of the episode. And as a quick refresher, here are the 2 truths and 1 lie again. Number 1, Maersk Alabama sailed within the range of known Somali pirates. Number 2, the $30,000 on Maersk Alabama was intended as ransom money. Number 3, Captain Phillips tried to escape from the pirates at the first chance he got. Did you figure out which one is a lie? Got the answer right here in the envelope, so let's open that up. And the lie is number 3. Brian explained how the scene in the movie where we see Tom Hanks' version of Captain Phillips jump into the water trying to escape from the pirates was completely fictional. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If you're watching the video version, here in a moment you'll see the credits roll. If you want to get your name in the credits for the next video and on the website at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/credits, you can learn how to become a Based on a True Story producer using the link in the description or at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/support. Once again, that's basedonatruestorypodcast.com/support. Until next time, thanks so much for spending your time with Brian and I today, and I'll chat with you again really soon.